My name is Patrick. I am your sleep expert. So today we are going to learn the most important part of all of the lessons that I will teach you going forward. Again, my name is Patrick DiNicola. I'm a sleep efficiency expert helping high performers, sales individuals increase their production and focus exponentially by focusing on sleep. So I'm the owner and founder of Live Plena. This is where you can find me, liveplena.com, holistic lifestyle company that seeks to educate others on reconnecting with certain practices that we have lost and increasing our health and vitality overall in life. So today I want to explain to you what is sleep and why it's so important. And what are the functions going on that drastically increase our performance when we get good night's sleep as opposed to a bad night's sleep. So the first thing to know about sleep that is completely lost upon every single person is that sleep is not an energy vacuum, whereas there's no energy going on while you're sleeping. I'm asleep, I'm not using energy, I'm not wasting energy, I'm not anything with energy. That is false. So if you were to compare someone that is sitting down for 8 hours and watching TV and watch the metabolic processes, and you could gauge how much energy that person is utilizing while being a sack of potatoes watching TV versus 8 hours of sleep, you would find that you are using far more energy while sleeping. Now, what's the importance of that? So the reason why I start with this is because everyone likes to think that it's not an energetic practice. And the thing that goes with the utilization of the energy that goes on while you're sleeping is that you are investing this energy to reap the benefit of gaining more energy. So for example, as long as you aren't going to bed on a super full stomach, when you are sleeping, the energy that normally goes towards doing the digestive process, which is what's going on during awake, you begin to utilize that energy in a different way. Yes, you will finish up your digestion, but a lot of the energy that is used in digestion is now diverted into different parts of the body, and thus you are healing different parts of the body because of that diversion of the energy. So sleep starts in the waking consciousness state. Obviously, as you're falling asleep, you're waking consciousness. So as you fall asleep, you begin to drift down through the different levels of brainwave activity. Eventually, usually about 20 to 30 minutes after falling asleep, if all the conditions were stable and the environment was good, you will have arrived into your first sleep cycle, and you begin to drop all the way down into deep sleep. So deep sleep takes maybe about an hour, give or take, to get into. Now, when you get into deep sleep, this is when your brain is at the delta brainwave activity. This means that energy that would typically be in the mind, focusing on thinking and doing and acting and all the things that happen when you're awake, are now diverted to different processes of the body, i.e. the example I used for digestion. So you have less brainwave activity going on here, so thus less energy, less synapses firing, et cetera. And so now the energy can go into different parts of the body. So deep sleep is where the body heals itself. This is where the organs detoxicate, aka digest, but liver, kidney, these things are detoxifying. They're flushing all the toxins that were attributed throughout the day. Muscles are being repaired, acidosis is being quelled, bones are being healed and refortified, minerals are going into the bones, etc. It's a healing process for the body. This is why when someone is in a very critical condition and a doctor can't solve the problem, they will sometimes put people in what is known as an induced coma. Now, an induced coma is not as good as deep sleep, but the reason why the doctor puts you into a coma is because he's allowing for the energy that is normally going towards breathing and all this and doing and moving to now focus internally on the body and thus try to heal the body. any doctor knows that the greatest healing that happens within the body is because of the body. The doctor does not ever heal you, and they will say that. If they are honest, they do not heal you. They provide the conditions necessary for the healing to occur. And so a doctor will put you in a coma if you're in a dire straits, and all other options are off the table to allow for the body to try and do the healing that the doctor itself could not promulgate. So that is deep sleep. That is the bottom of the pit of sleep. It is where the brainwave is at its slowest. It is even more slow than meditation. Very few people can reach delta brainwave activity consciously. Master meditators can, and it is a very healing and powerful process. So as you exit deep sleep, you enter back in through light sleep. So light sleep is this in-between phase. It's around 40 to 50% of our sleep. And science doesn't really attribute a lot of healing nor positive effects of light sleep. But it facilitates the transition from waking consciousness into unconsciousness with deep sleep, and then up back into REM consciousness, which is actually high brainwave activity and stimulation. So on the way back up, you then enter into REM sleep. Now, REM sleep is one of the most important parts of sleep. And you might understand what REM means. It means rapid eye movement. And REM sleep is still not fully understood. It is assumed that this is where dreaming occurs, i.e., because your eyes are fluttering behind the eyelids, that conscious data information is being sort of misunderstood and you have the experience of a dream. Now, this has not been proven, but this is what is the guess. So REM sleep is vital because what happens in deep sleep, where the body is the focus and healing occurs within the body, now the brain takes center stage. And so REM sleep is this process where you're taking the conscious information that you took in throughout the entire day, all of the conscious and unconscious information that you received, all the input. So for example, we're walking down the park and we're seeing all these colors and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there's a lot of information and our brains actually make shortcuts so that it makes sense for us as we're exploring the world. It makes shortcuts. If you see a tree, it looks like another tree, your brain kind of projects what you have past experienced, because there's a lot of information out there. We have these five senses, and we, taste, touch, hear, smell, and etc. But we have a lot of these senses and see, and there's so much information that our brain actually cannot process every single bit of information at all whatsoever. It does not have a chance in hell. That's why people who are highly observant are really good detectives, etc., because they are able to more narrowly focus their vision, more narrowly focus on the task at hand, and actually observe things that other people are missing. Because again, the brain is constantly making shortcuts. So in REM sleep, you're taking all of that noise, all of that sight, sound, taste, touch, everything that you experience through the five senses throughout the day is now in the brain. It's in the prefrontal cortex, and the brain is now taking that information, transmitting it, we think, through the hypothalamus into all of the conscious information that was taken in by the five senses, transmitting it through the hypothalamus into the long-term memory banks. And then the most vital function of REM sleep is not necessarily just that transfer of knowledge, that transfer of information, and the processing of the information, because there are things that are more important than others, and somehow the brain knows how to categorize and organize this through REM. But the most important part of the process is the data bank wiping that happens and occurs after some of that information is transferred through the hypothalamus into the long-term memory banks. So the reason why that's important is because we all know that lack of sleep really, really affects performance. If you stay up for 36 or 48 hours, you start to not be able to retain information or perform better in your work or whatever you're doing. You know it's going to take an effect. Hopefully, when you're in that situation, it's only because you had to, and it was a must. You had a deadline, etc., etc. But we know that that happens. Now, the reason that that happens is because of the function of the brain. You see, the brain is only meant to take in a just amount of raw data and information, and then it becomes overwhelmed. It starts to not have the room to take in that information. Think of a laptop or a computer. As you start to take pictures and add videos and do all this stuff, you're putting a lot of data into the hard drive. As the hard drive gets more full and full, the computer starts to run more slowly. And this is what exactly happens with our brains. So if we didn't have the REM come in, take the information, move it to a secondary hard drive, an exterior hard drive, right? So backing up the information, and then wiping away the memory that does exist, that's clogging up the informational receptors of the brain, you would not be able to move forward and have and learn new things and evolve, and humans would have suffered their demise a long time ago. So a normal sleep cycle, so then after your REM cycle, you then back down to you head back down through light sleep, down into deep sleep. Apologies for the fumbling of the words there. So a normal sleep cycle from start to finish, where it drops down and back up, is around 90 minutes to 120 minutes. So about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Now, given that we sleep for 8 hours or 7 hours or 6 hours or however long you sleep, we're going through multiple cycles a day or a night, multiple cycles. So what happens actually is that the first few cycles are really more focused on deep sleep. So you get a lot more deep sleep in the first few cycles than you do in the last few cycles. And then the vice versa is correct with REM sleep, is that you're getting more REM sleep in the last few cycles than you are in the first few cycles. So when it comes to designing what is a good routine, and it is very important to have a consistent sleeping routine. So that's all the information that I'm giving you today about what's going on with sleep and what are the vital functions that are being performed with sleep. So a review is that deep sleep heals the body and is more prevalent in the beginning state, in the beginning sleep cycles. REM sleep is the healing of the mind and the healing and the data banking of raw information and data, and is more prevalent in the later stages of sleep. And sleep cycles last anywhere from 90 minutes to 120 minutes. Now, how do we use this information toward our betterment, toward our improved performance? So that states that we should be sleeping in a similar cycle that our cycles are experienced. So I use 90 minutes. That's how I use to judge how many cycles of sleep we should be getting. Now, this is taken directly from people who coach high-level performers, athletes, such as soccer players and basketball players all over the world. This is what they use to increase the performance of those athletes. They use the 90-minute cycle rule. And so this rule states that if you go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, you're either going to wake up 7.5 hours after that, so that would be what, 6:30, correct? Or 9 hours after, which would be 8 a.m., or 6 hours after, which would be 5 a.m. Now, we're doing this because the natural systems of the mind and the body ask us to do it this way. And the reason why they ask us to do this way, let's say, for example, you get 8 hours of sleep. So you're in 8 hours of sleep, and as science has shown, and as math can find, you should be entering into a deep sleep cycle right as your alarm wakes you up. So if you're entering into a deep sleep cycle, that means that your body is utilizing energy to invest into recuperating and recovering the body. And then you wake up. So you're at the lowest brainwave state, you're at delta. So in order to wake up, because it is very hard to wake someone who's in deep sleep, in order to wake up, you need a loud alarm. You need a loud alarm, and that alarm excites the central nervous system. The central nervous system then reacts to that alarm, producing cortisol and adrenaline to get you up out of bed. So one, you just invested energy into a process that was now interrupted. So that energy that you invested, some of it is lost. Some of it is repurposed, some of it is lost. But more importantly, you are interrupting, more importantly, you are now using awake chemicals, hormones known as adrenaline and cortisol, et cetera, to wake yourself up. So now you have to wake yourself up, and you're in this fight or flight stance, you're in this fight or flight existence, and you know that because you can experience it. I mean, you're in deep sleep, alarm comes off, you spring up out of bed, and your heart's racing. So now you've utilized those hormones to perform a function that they're not necessarily intended to always perform. So you now rob yourself of those hormones for later in the day. Second example. So you took that, and so you're like, okay, well, maybe I'll get only 7 hours of sleep. So instead of 8 hours, 7 hours. But again, doesn't fit into the cycles. But you're like, well, I'll try it out. So now you're in REM sleep, because math says that we're going to be in REM sleep. So you're in REM sleep, which is better than deep sleep. Doesn't require as many of the hormonal responses to get you out. See, because REM sleep is very close to waking consciousness. So you want to be near REM when you wake up. This is correct. But you want to be on the latter stages of REM instead of the beginning stages of REM. So if you wake up after 7 hours, you're more likely to have interrupted a process of what? Taking the conscious information from the prefrontal cortex and storing it into the long-term memory banks. So now you're interrupting this process, and what happens is that the process that didn't get finished is the cleansing of the information that is still in the prefrontal cortex. So now you wake up, you might have had a little bit of a fight or flight response, but probably not. And instead of the other story where your heart's racing because you were dead asleep and you woke up, no, you were in the dream state. You were in the state where all this information is flying through your subconscious, and you didn't get a chance to wipe the memory bank. So now you wake up, and what do you feel? Groggy, cloudy-minded, lethargic. And what do you need? You need a cup of coffee right away to start the day. So those are the examples that I use. So we don't want to wake up during the middle of processes, because one, we're losing that energy. Some of that energy may never come back. Two, we're using different hormonal processes that are best served for when we're awake. Three, we're interrupting healing that's occurring within the body. And four, we're not data banking all our information and leaving some residual information into the brain, thus making you more groggy minded and it taking you longer for you to get your day started and for you to perform at your best. So I suggest you sleep 7.5 hours a day. You keep it this consistent 7.5 hours. If you can't, don't do 7 hours, don't do 6.5 hours, do 6. And you know this to be true because I guarantee you, as students and just human beings, that there have been times where you slept 8 or 9 hours, probably not 9, maybe 10, and you woke up and you didn't feel great. But then there were times where you stayed up really late, studying for an exam, writing a paper, etc., and you only got 3 or 4 hours of sleep. But you woke up feeling fan-frickin-tastic. Now, how do you explain that? You explain that by understanding what was happening. See, in one instance, you were interrupting a process. In the other instance, the process was not interrupted. I hope this has been educational and informational for you. I hope you can utilize this to increase your performance, production, focus, energy, and happiness. You can find me on Instagram at PatZenSleep. It's been a real pleasure having the time to stand and talk. And let me know if you have any questions. This is all surface level stuff. We can go deeper into these functions. Just reach out and ask, and I will be happy to provide an answer. Ciao for now. Take care.